Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Newswhip webinar. Thank you very much for joining us on this Wednesday morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Just waiting for people to trickle in, but while they do, I will start the introductions and welcome our esteemed guests. So my name is Benedict Nicholson. I am the Director of Content at Newswhip, and I am thrilled to welcome with us Chris Miles here today, who is formerly on the team at CrowdTangle. I know many of you know him, now a digital media consultant. And also I have Sara Katritos with us, who is an in-house media expert with us here at Newswhip, who works closely with a lot of our media clients, and very excited to very well-positioned people to talk about the current social landscape for news publishers. So really think we're going to have a great conversation here today. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah, no, it's always interesting. I know this isn't your first time on a Newswhip webinar, Chris, so I appreciate you making the time for us again. And Sarah, obviously not your first time either, not your first rodeo. Cool. So a quick agenda for today. I think we want to spend sort of probably 10, 15 minutes talking about the media landscape, especially as we approach the election. I know that's something, the American election, of course, a lot of American attendees today. So that'll be a big focus even for people outside the US, I'm sure. And then sort of Sarah's going to take us through the platform, how you can do a lot of the things that we're going to talk about within Newswhip, and we're just going to have a general discussion about kind of audience development, journalism that you can do through these kind of social media tools. So if you have any questions as we go along, please do put them in the chat. We'll probably try and answer them live, but there may be occasions where we can't or we need to look something up. So if that's the case, then we'll follow up with you afterwards. But yeah, it's a quick webinar today, so don't want to waste too much time on intro. So I guess we'll get straight into it, and I'll start with you, Chris. How do you see the social landscape for journalists now? I mean, it's probably even changed since June, which is I think when we last chatted, and especially as you say with these big tentpole events, we've had the Olympics since. We've got the US election coming up. So what are you seeing out there at the moment?
Yeah, it's the landscape is changing, and maybe to opine a little bit about what the last couple of years have looked like across social media and social monitoring. When I first started at CrowdTangle, we were a super small team, and we were focusing on a problem that a lot of publishers had, which was it was hard for them to understand what was going viral on the big one or two or maybe three platforms that a lot of people were using. And that was back then, this was 6 or 7 years ago, that was Facebook and Twitter for the most part. The big open question was, how do we understand when we post something and it goes viral? How do we understand what the audience is that is actually consuming that content? Who are the consumers? Where are they? How do you kind of like make sense of the people that are sharing your content? CrowdTangle then, of course, became part of Facebook, and we spent years trying to solve that problem, specifically for audience development editors and journalists when it came to Facebook platforms, so Facebook and Instagram for the most part. Over the last couple of years, the platform landscape has changed. There are a lot more platforms, of course, that are now very, very important to people. It's not just Facebook and Twitter. In fact, probably Facebook and Twitter have slowed down in importance, but you have platforms like Reddit and, of course, TikTok and LinkedIn and all of these other platforms. And it's very important now to understand not just the specific questions about one or two platforms, but to understand the breadth of everything, to understand just kind of, what's happening across all of these different disparate platforms. And that can be hard because these platforms also aren't the same. Again, 6, 7 years ago, it was all about text content and somebody posted something or somebody posted a link. Now it's about, influencers. It's about video content. It's about potentially, text content or specific communities in a subreddit, for instance. So it's a lot more diverse out there. There's a lot more to it. Video these days is by far the biggest, most consumed, and the most important type of content out there. And CrowdTangle, was a tool that was very limited to 2 or 3 platforms. And now we're in a world where you need to understand all of the platforms and kind of how those trends are percolating from one platform to another.
Yeah, and I think that point is fascinating. Especially, I think Instagram, TikTok in particular are just becoming these huge networks for news. But it's a fascinating look at, especially, when we're talking about competition for eyeballs. There were a lot of influencers invited to the DNC this year, along with journalists, for example. And there's that kind of, if it's political content that now being produced by influencers, that journalists are then competing for those eyeballs. They have to think about how they're framing their content within that. Sarah, is that what Chris was saying, a real cross-platform strategy? Is that something you're seeing with the partners of ours that you work with?
Absolutely. I'd say that's probably the main question that I get is, how can I not only understand what is trending from my content or my competitors' content in terms of page views or link clicks, but what does it look like across the entire social media landscape? And also that tie between online news and what's being published on websites, and then how that's spreading across social media. There's new social platforms, I feel like, that launch every single day, and people are hungry to understand what's happening across all of them, and how, I guess, within a topic, is it a different story that's trending from Facebook to X to Reddit, or is it very similar across all of them? And being able to understand that is so key.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too long without being able to offer some tangible advice to people. So, Chris, how should publishers approach these changes? I mean, what should they be looking at? What should they be planning for? What should they be doing with this new landscape that we're looking at?
Yeah, it's what we're kind of describing is probably not new to anybody. So if you're on the call and you're like, yeah, this is all very duh. This is not new. This didn't happen, recently. There's a lot more platforms that you as a social media editor or you as a journalist need to pay attention to. But that in itself is pretty hard. Again, going back to the old CrowdTangle days. Our unicorn was always, how do we figure out how to report on all of the data from all of the platforms that we have access to in one easy to see way. And I think we'll get into that a little bit more on the product side here in a minute. But it's a very hard question to tackle. A retweet isn't the same as an Instagram share, which isn't the same as a TikTok like, which isn't the same as a Reddit upvote. They're all different metrics, and each of those different metrics kind of moves media across those platforms in different ways. But when you're kind of thinking about that, and you're thinking about, okay, I'm a journalist, I'm a social media editor, how do we approach this, and how do we make sense of this kind of like this new world order on social media? In many ways, the old tactics still work, and I think the oldest tactic is essentially just sharing stories to people in a way that they want to consume it. And boiled down, that means when you're on TikTok, understanding what is really trending on TikTok, understanding why it's trending, understanding kind of like the format. It's video, it's short form, it's very kind of like boom, boom, boom. But understanding kind of the nuts and bolts of how content works and how people want to consume content is very, very important. And to do that, you need a social monitoring tool. You need a tool that gives you cues on how to frame certain types of stories, what is going viral at any given time on the platform, and just how to make sense of one platform to another. Understanding all of the different ways people get their news these days, I think is a very difficult problem to kind of chew on.
Yeah.
And when it comes to Facebook, when it comes to TikTok, when it comes to Reddit or LinkedIn, each of those different audiences are as different as a newspaper reader, or as a broadcast news watcher, or a radio listener. They have different kind of touch points where you have to understand, okay, how are these people getting their news? Why are they logging on? What type of news do they want to consume? Of course, a LinkedIn user is going to be completely different than a Reddit user. So making sense of all of that, I think, is kind of the problem, and what we're trying to solve with social monitoring.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think a couple of things to your points there. I think, sometimes it is just as simple as like this same video does work on a different platform. We just have to give it a different caption, and it works better. And sometimes it's interesting to see that. But then even like, obviously TikTok has echoes across the internet. So, you see a lot of other social platforms leaning heavily into video, trying to capture some of that magic, I guess, which is super interesting. And sometimes different videos work better on some platforms than others. Sara, are you seeing any particular interest in any networks from our publisher partners?
I would say I'm seeing a big increase in Reddit. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of teams have been asking. We use Reddit a little bit, but we're trying to increase our strategy. We're finding that so much of the news actually starts on Reddit before it makes its way to mainstream social. I know that we just did a webinar all about how to make the most of Reddit for the newsroom. So it's definitely an area of interest, and I'm hearing it more and more. I'm getting a lot of questions about threads, and if that is, I guess, a hot place that topics are.
Yeah, it still feels a bit TBD, threads, I think.
It does. It does.
People
Yeah.
haven't quite figured it out yet.
Yeah. I don't think it's of the utmost importance yet, but I think people are curious about that. And then I'd say Twitter is a really big one. X, those that politicians have such a voice on there. A lot of political news is going on there. So with the election season, I'd say that's probably where the interest is. And then of course, Facebook, like it's tried and true. It is a staple within everybody's strategy. Obviously, there's been changes within the Facebook platform for publishers in the past few years, so that's always something that's asked about. But everyone needs to still know about what's going on in the platform. It's still the number one, I would say, need for newsrooms is how can we understand what's happening on Facebook?
Right. So it's, a Facebook plus strategy almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. And then Chris, you mentioned, everyone needs social monitoring. There's a lot of tools out there. What do you see as being the key elements of a tool for it to be successful within newsroom, either from an audience development standpoint or from a news gathering standpoint?
Yeah, and maybe I could kind of pull back the curtain on how we thought about product at
Right.
CrowdTangle.
Yeah,
Maybe that
please
might be
share your
helpful.
secrets.
Because again, there's going to be some very key things that are both obvious and not so obvious, that are important to look for with a specific tool. Again, the biggest kind of our unicorn problem that we were always trying to solve is how do we make cross-network or cross-platform data digestible. Again, it's very, very hard to line up a Reddit upvote with a Facebook like. They're not the same. It's not apples to apples. It's cucumbers to starfish. And being able to just kind of like show the entire landscape of social media in a easy to digest way is just so clutch. And there are so few tools out there that do a good job of that. But it's something to try and get. It's also important to get real-time data. Real-time data these days is one of those things where it's just such a premium resource, and it's so hard to actually get good high quality data that is actually coming in real time. And especially if you're a journalist, if you're in the news business, you want to understand what is trending and what is happening at the moment, at any given time. If there's breaking news, or if there's a upcoming debate, or if there is, a big award show, or whatever it might be, you want to be in the moment, and you want to see what is trending and what is going viral in the moment. And from a product standpoint, that could be very, very hard, both because it's hard to get access to that data across multiple platforms, and it's hard to kind of, show and surface the most relevant things in all of the noise there. So those are going to be two very key things. Some not so obvious stuff that we always got feedback at CrowdTangle were easy, a very easy user experience. It's very duh, but if you open up a tool and it's just kind of like spaghetti and meatballs, just kind of like splash in your face, it doesn't make any sense. There's numbers everywhere. There's content that doesn't make any sense. That's not very helpful, and that's not something that you could really share with your boss or the rest of your team. So you want something that is just very easy to navigate and very easy and intuitive to understand. Something that you could build a workflow around, and not something that is, kind of a drag plugging into and having to work. We don't want this to be, Microsoft Excel. No offense to Microsoft Excel, but we don't want this to be Excel, and where it's an experience. We want it to be something that you could, do in your sleep if you wanted to. And what that comes with is, good reporting and easy to understand metrics and customizable data. All of that stuff is, is something that I think you're going to want to be on the lookout for in any product. We spent a lot of time at CrowdTangle trying to make things easy breezy when it came to understanding metrics, and when it came to just setting up a dashboard. And it's a hard problem to solve. NewsWhip does a good job with it, and it's something that I think any social media editor or whoever is plugging into this tool should really kind of pay attention to.
Great, and without leading the witness too much, I might use that as a springboard to jump into showing the platform and hopefully how easy it is to use. So I know, Sarah, you have a couple of things prepared. I do want to talk about metrics and things like that, Chris, so I'll come back to you on that. But I think, Sarah, why don't we start with a more audience dev use case? So why don't we start with the competitive analysis, and you can kind of talk us through how you do that in NewsWhip and some examples of what you might look for.
Yeah. Absolutely. Within all, I would say every single conversation with newsrooms that I've had, I think ever, competitive analysis comes up. That is probably the main use case within NewsWhip. And that does not just mean for online news, that means across all of social media as well. So I have a really nice competitor dashboard set up. We'll look at Business Insider just as an example of how to find our content and how to surface the trends, and it's very easy. And since we were just talking about user interface, I think that's a nice segue into how easy it is to find your content. So when you want to find a search and build a search, and this could be about anything, anywhere, I really like to start here just so you have an idea of how this was made. It's very simple. We are using Boolean logic and keywords to pair together and filter out specific keywords to create a search that you would like to see. Boolean logic, it is quite simple, and you can get as narrow or as broad as you'd like with your search terms. So we love that. So this search is not looking at keywords. Since this is a competitive search, we're pulling everything that is coming from any Business Insider page, looking at their owned content. But of course, you're able to mix and match with keywords and sources. Within the
Sorry, Sarah, just to interrupt quickly, you could add more than one. So if there's like a Business Insider politics page, you could add that to this search. Say that, because a lot of people have more than one Facebook page that they share their content on, for example. So those could all go within this same search, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So you could have the search be cross-platform, which in this case, we're looking at Business Insider cross-platform, but you could just have a search or a dashboard set up for all Facebook pages, where when we look at CrowdTangle, that's most synonymous with the list building feature there, being able to filter in and filter out any Facebook pages, but also websites, Twitter accounts. We have a LinkedIn partnership in beta right now. That is for very specific publishers. If anyone's interested in that, feel free to reach out. But that's very early stages there. We have TikTok, we have subreddits, we have Instagram and YouTube channels. So where this is really great, and I feel like the term cross-platform comes up a lot. This is going to help you do that. It's very simple. And again, unlimited in its nature, which means you can build out a huge search that's looking at all of your competitors in one place, or all politicians' Facebook pages, or I don't know, all nonprofits' Twitter accounts. I mean, it's whatever you want. So this feature, I would say, is probably the most used within the search function.
Okay, great. And then yeah, take us through the results. Take us through what we're looking at when we look at the rest of this.
Absolutely. So once you find your search, of course, you have a couple other filter options here. So language, where the outlet's publishing from in terms of location, categories with newsrooms is big to spot trends in entertainment, politics, some broader areas here. But you'll just go ahead and save that. The first thing that we see here is the timeline. So the timeline is really meant to be this heartbeat of the platform. It's taking everything in terms of like what is being engaged with and also what's being published in terms of volume, and showing you an overarching high level look at what's happening at any given moment. This updates in real time. You can see as the line kind of fades here. That's as, you know, as people are gaining interest in something. But the timeline can be set
pretty much up to the minute real time, right?
Yeah, yeah. Within like 60 seconds to 60 to 90, mostly 60. Extremely real time. So this will show you immediately if there's something that's starting to bubble up or trend or go viral. But with public interest, how we are quantifying this is likes, shares, and comments on Facebook, and retweets and likes on Twitter. That is on the URL that is being published for the search. So with the timeline, we're specifically looking at that intersection between online news and what is being published from a website, and then how that is being shared and spread across Facebook and Twitter specifically within the timeline. So the public interest will be those accumulations of those social engagements. So essentially answering the question of like, what does my audience care about at this period of time? Where are the peaks in interest in terms of a search? So this could be a search on a person. It could just be all of the content being published in English in North America. I mean, it's whatever you want, but when you see these clear spikes in interest, that will allow you to click into it and pinpoint exactly what article or what headline had driven interest during that time.
Okay, great. Interesting. And then media interest obviously is how many were published at a specific time as well, right?
Exactly. So we're looking at volume here. A really major use case with this is being able to benchmark the two together. So let's say you see a topic you're interested in and it has low media interest, but high public interest. It's telling you maybe your competitors haven't caught on to that yet, or maybe it's not the most written about story, but it's highly engaged with.
Yeah,
so
we'll see that more when we look at a specific topic within breaking news. I do want to get onto that, but if you could just take us through the rest of the widgets and kind of what we're seeing, what we're measuring, that would be good.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just one dashboard view where you kind of scroll through, and again, we can view everything cross-platform, so very easy to digest and very user-friendly when you want to piece that out. The first one we're looking at is articles. So obviously online news. We have many different ways that you can make sense of this information. If you want just a real-time feed of everything that's being published as it comes out, we could do that. We're also looking at total interactions across individual platforms or just overall. So this is going to tell you what is performing the best, maybe on X or on Facebook, or what has the most Pinterest pins, or just overall what, as it stands, what has the most engagement. And then you'll have our overperforming metric. It's a little different than what CrowdTangle would report on in terms of overperforming. This overperforming metric, and Chris, I can turn this over to you in a second as well, but this is showcasing what is performing well in terms of what that news outlet has been publishing in the last 30 days. So when we look at how it's overperforming, we're looking at it, in this case, it's just Business Insider, but let's say this was a search that had many different news outlets, which what we'll look at, it's relative to that particular headline. Chris, we talked about this a bit earlier, but the CrowdTangle metric that you were talking about, if you wanted to touch on that here.
Yeah, I think it's so key to have something that kind of pulls kind of like the gems from the sand, so to speak. Overperforming at CrowdTangle was a metric that really allowed you to understand what was going viral at any given time, whether it was on your own content or on competitors' content or on random pages like an influencer or a sub page that you were tracking. And it would allow you to of course see trends and how content was moving. It's something that I think is just pretty critical today if you're a social media editor or if you're a journalist trying to follow social media. Just understanding what the big impact makers and trendsetters are across a particular platform is very, very helpful. There's a lot of ways where you could, I would imagine you could play around with this within NewsWhip, where you could, search for overperforming keywords or search across overperforming platforms. And that's where I think it becomes very interesting in kind of stitching all of that data and all of those trends together for whatever it might be, and however relevant it might be to you. I think that's where the magic and all of this comes. The other cool thing that NewsWhip has that CrowdTangle did not have is, of course, a little bit of trends forecasting and velocity. But velocity is something that's just really cool, especially if you're a social media editor and you're trying to understand, okay, we have a couple of good posts today that are starting to take up. Do we want to put money behind these? Do we want to ask our influencer group to help boost these stories? These are kind of the ones that are really starting to make noise. And using this metric, I think you could really identify articles that people are interested in, that you could share more widely and become really some big tentpole articles for the day or for the week, or for other platforms like your newsletter or even your podcast. So I think this is just a very cool way to identify what your audience is interested in and to really kind of inform the rest of your editorial or your audience strategy.
Exactly. I think both the highest velocity and predicted interactions are good. I'm sure, Sara, you'll show us predicted interactions, but that's a big thing of kind of seeing what organic interest there is in something, and then using whatever audience dev machine you have, whatever levers you want to pull to then take that organic interest and amplify it and snowball it, as Sara kind of said earlier. That's an interesting use case, definitely.
Yeah, velocity is really meant to showcase speed. I swear everybody says exactly in the same way. We want to try to find the stories that are bubbling up. Velocity is that's exactly how to do it. So velocity is going to show you not what's most viral, not what has the most engaged with, the most engagements, but rather like what is traveling at the highest speed, so that you can then go inform your other teams like, okay, time to take action. Let's tap into this before it's major. So velocity and prediction are both very unique and special to NewsWhip. These are metrics that you won't find anywhere else. Prediction really ties in the total interactions, and velocity and uses those two metrics to predict the virality of a story within the coming hours or days. So we're looking at the speed of the engagement. So how quickly is that going from 0 to where it's at right now? What's that rate of change? And then what's the volume? So how quick has it gone so far? And by benchmarking those two together, we get a pretty accurate measurement of where the story is likely going to land. So another huge idea I've been seeing is just a collaboration between social and newsrooms. These teams are not siloed. So being able to understand what is predicted to take off from the news perspective to then inform your social team, what Chris was just saying, like where can we be pushing out or amplifying this message based on its success with the news story. So we take those two metrics and we apply them to Facebook as well. So I think that's a nice segue over into what we can show from, I would say, a CrowdTangle replacement perspective, being able to look at Facebook pages cross, I guess, post type. You can segment this out however you'd like. And then you're able to look at it and make sense of it in the same way or similar way. We have reactions. So pulling what people are reacting negatively or positively to in the self-reported sentiment idea here. You also are able to look at what has the most interactions, but segmented out here. Most recent, which again showcases the real-time nature of the tool we're looking within a minute. You have overperforming, which is the same as what I mentioned earlier, that's compared to the page. So what is performing exceptionally well for that Facebook page in the last 30 days? Velocity, which is speed, and prediction. We can apply those to Facebook as well, which is huge for these teams to make sense of Facebook in a way that you never could. So to kind of spot what stories might be bubbling up on Facebook and then inform your social strategy for the other platforms as well.
And just to note, these are predicted interactions. These are quite old stories, so they're not predicted to grow very much because they've already done most of their growth. You can see the arc on there, but yeah, for example, that one is predicted to grow a considerable amount still.
And across every platform we look at, you're able to click into each of these posts and get kind of like a baseball card view of the post or the story and understand down to the like exactly what that trend is. And that really is applicable across every social platform that we have. When we look at places like Facebook or Instagram, the idea here is what is trending on this platform and how does that differ from the other platforms? So when you pull this open, you'll see, reposts, likes, total interactions, but then when you open it up, you can see that trend in what that engagement looks like. So are these stories living or dying? Why are they living or dying? Are they still increasing or have they started to plateau? Is this something that I should tap into or has it kind of faded out? So all these questions are what you'd be able to answer, just like one view within here.
Cool. And then there's Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. You could add TikTok as well if you have a TikTok account, right? These are all we can look at.
Exactly.
Great. I want to make sure we have time for looking at a breaking news event. So this is a future event that we know is coming, just so we can see how this kind of reporting gets done in advance, and then you could set alerts, for example, which I'm sure we'll go over. But this is about the debate that's upcoming in the US election, I think next week. So take us through it, Sarah.
Sure. In terms of finding this was obviously a keyword search. We're looking at all locations. So globally, how is this story being told? What I find really interesting is that there's a decrease in the amount of articles published in the last 7 days. So considering the amount of teams that have asked me about this event and everyone's focusing on it, there's an increase in engagement and a decrease in volume of news articles published within the last 7 days. So just looking at this really quickly, we could take that bit of insight away from it. Again, with this public interest and media interest graph, you'll be able to see the clear spikes in interest, which probably took place last week. It looks like there was a pretty big increase in interest then and has died down since. One thing that I want to point out here, and since we're looking at a larger time frame, we're not looking so much at prediction, but rather what are the headlines that are resonating with people as it relates to this topic as we head into this event. So when we see, and we're trying to understand how we should be reporting on that as a newsroom, it's really vital to be able to say, how is my audience reacting and who is amplifying every single message that's out there? So this is a really good example. If I were to click in, let's say here. So Daily Wire, this is performing 25 times better than anything else that Daily Wire has put out in the last month, which is significant. But as we look at the interactions over time, the amount of times that this has been shared and amplified over the last, when was this published? Several days. It's very, very, very easy to see exactly who was contributing to that engagement. And what do they stand for? And who are their audiences? Like someone like Ben Shapiro was a huge amplifier of this particular message. It's very clear maybe who his audience might be. So being able to very quickly see not only what news stories are trending, but why they're trending and who has caused them to trend it goes well beyond the needs of these newsrooms, and you can then take that and apply that to your Facebook strategy instantly. So
And then this is pulling in data from all accounts, right? So we didn't specify any accounts, so it's not just news accounts, it's also influencers. So I think I saw Kamala Harris there in the Twitter feed, or the X feed rather, just posting about stuff. Sorry, no, in the actual feed, yeah, Kamala is there talking about the debate in the X posts feed, yeah, so it's pulling in stuff from across the internet, which I think speaks to your point, Chris, about the importance of understanding what's happening across the whole of the internet, and different things are resonating in different ways on different platforms, and this shows that.
Yeah, and it's so hard to, I think the election stuff, the horse race politics, like when it comes to like social media, it's never going to be, you know, the same as like Ben and J-Lo breaking up. It's going to have a different vibe. And I think, you know, social media editors can use this tool to understand what that vibe is and what are those stories. You know, there might be some tantalizing data around like how are different messages performing in different swing states, you know, or like which posts seem to be getting the most traction on local news in Pennsylvania or Michigan or whatever. I think you know, the point about Ben Shapiro and Trump wins the debate, like, you know, that framing is also interesting, and it's interesting to kind of like take cues from that, because people on social media want to rally behind a so and so wins, or like my side is beating the other side, and there's like a horse race politics element to that. And I think what you're seeing here, of course, is like what is trending, but I think there's more cues that you could take out of this data, and you could probably get more creative and dig a little bit more into all of this to really kind of, you know, pull out some interesting tidbits, especially if you're a journalist trying to tell the story of this election as it relates to social media or for a social media audience. So yeah, we found a lot of interesting nuggets, so to speak, when we were covering elections at CrowdTangle. You know, which candidates were seeing the biggest spike in popularity in a specific state or with a specific group. There's some interesting stuff there, and there might be some cute stories that you could you know, put together on how that data compares to polling data, or how that data compares to, you know, wider sentiment that might be picking up across the internet at any given time.
Yeah, it looks like you wanted to highlight the highlights widget there, Sarah. So I'll give you space to do that.
Yeah, I think with this framing and how easy it is to see, we keep talking about cross-platform with the highlights feature, and even when we create a report around this topic, to very clearly see what the trends are from post count to interactions across the different platforms. In this case, it's all just decreasing everywhere in the last 7 days on social, even though engagement has increased generally only 3%. But being able to look at this, either, you know, copy it into an email, send it to your social team. But when you have these maybe broader subjects that aren't so specific, like Roe v. Wade, that dashboard always is changing and fluctuating every day. Maybe the post count has increased on TikTok, but the engagement has increased on Instagram. So if you're looking to inform your strategy, where should you be focusing your time, your effort, your dollars? Like how should you make more informed and, I would say, smarter decisions behind what you're doing? Obviously, the gut feel is something that a lot of newsrooms are going by, or have always gone by, like what they think would do well, but to actually be able to see it down to the like, and down to the percent, it goes miles, especially with executive reporting and being able to answer the why behind any decision that you make. So really, just overall, I would say seeing these analytics and understanding exactly what's happening and why it's happening, and making your decisions based on that, like that's gold.
Yeah, I want to come back to executive reporting, Sarah, because I think we can showcase Report Builder, but just quickly, we have 5 minutes left. If anyone does have any questions, please throw them in the chat. We will get to them. But yeah, if you want to, in the meantime, show us what the Report Builder function looks like, Sarah.
Yeah, it's an instant boardroom ready report that showcases everything the dashboard tells you, including the highlights. So especially with very abundant searches, I mean, this could be a 50-page long report. I can show an example actually of that as well. But it is created in 2 seconds, and it really just outlines every single thing that we spoke about, not only the percent increase and decrease in interest across the platforms, but also what does that look like down to the post or down to the story? What exactly are the headlines that are successful across online news, but Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, and really just like, how can I take everything that I'm learning and everything I'm doing within NewsWhip and share that really easily? And I think Report Builder does a really, really good job at exporting everything that you do in a very easily digestible way so that you can go and have this cross-platform view for maybe the higher level executives that don't have time to be, getting in the weeds of things every day.
And the
So
analysis is editable as well. It pulls some analysis for you if you just want a quick look at stuff, but you can also edit there before you
yeah.
export anything if you're interested in doing so, or wanted to note anything in particular for executives that might not be familiar, or anyone beyond your immediate team that might not be familiar. Yeah, do alerts very quickly, and then
Okay.
to wrap up.
Cool. I think where the platform just fully comes full circle is with the alerts. So obviously everything we're showing you, it's a lot of information. It's a lot to digest. It is easy to digest, but at the end of the day, you need the insights to come to you as well. So our alerts are amazing. And I want to highlight some of the Facebook alerts as well. You can do alerts for web, Facebook, X, and YouTube. These could be real-time alerts where you're setting custom thresholds based on interactions. So if you know that the debate is interesting, but you don't care to report on the debate until, something has reached 5,000 interactions within 12 hours. You don't really care about stories about your competitors unless they're predicted to be viral or traveling at X speed. This is where you can really get down to the engagement with how you choose to be alerted. Not everybody wants hundreds of alerts in their inbox every day. So this is where you can get really granular with it, but it's also unlimited, which is, I think, amazing. You can have alerts set up for things that are not happening, but if they do ever happen, you'll want to know in real time. So that's where you can kind of leverage this for, I'd say, like crisis mitigation. So if there ever is a topic that you need to know of, sometimes you won't know until it's already viral. So this will help avoid all of it for you. And then with, I would say, the CrowdTangle replacement aspect here, you have it covered. I mean, we can search based on or get alerted based on reactions. As soon as it reached the 100th angry reaction on your Facebook page, like you'll get a notification immediately. That could go to Slack, Microsoft Teams, or email. And then I'd say the other type is a digest. So if you don't want real-time alerts, or you just want an email coming to your inbox every morning at 9 a.m. that recaps all of the election coverage, we have AI digests, which are fairly new to NewsWhip, which will take all of our analytics that we're seeing in here, and we will make sense of it for you, write a little summary, showcase trends, things that might be taking off or bubbling up. These alerts can go out to teammates that are not NewsWhip users as well. So always good to keep everybody informed and on the same page with what's happening. And yeah, I mean, these alerts are amazing. I could probably spend an hour.
Yeah, highly recommend the alerts. I use them a lot for my day job as well, which is writing about the news and brands and brand reputation and stuff. So I think that's all we have time for, folks, I'm afraid. But thank you very much for coming along. If you have any questions, it's Sarah, if you put your email in the chat, I'm sure people will follow up with you, or Chris as well. People might have questions for you. Feel free to both do that. And otherwise, we will wrap up there. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Sarah. Very insightful. I've learned a lot as always as we chatted. Thank you very much for attending, everyone. Do reach out if you have any questions, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.